All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on the role of state apprenticeship agencies with K-12 teacher registered apprenticeships. I'm incredibly excited to have you all here today and to hear from our incredible panel that we've been able to put together. Um, this is National Apprenticeship Week. This is also the 2-year anniversary of the K-12 teacher occupation getting approved for registered apprenticeship. And I've just been personally blessed to get to work with multiple state apprenticeship agencies across the country to launch K-12 teacher apprenticeships. My name is David Donaldson with the National Center for Grow Your Own. Thank you again for coming to today's webinar. And I am joined here today and I'll ask my panelists if they would like to turn their cameras on and join us as I introduce them all. We have Kathleen Taylor from the Florida Department of Education here with us today. We're also joined by David Polk of the Wisconsin Bureau of Apprenticeship Standards. And we're also joined by Josh Laney of the Alabama Office of Apprenticeship. I've gotten to know each of these individuals due to multiple reasons. One, these folks all have something in common, that they're all members of the National Association of State and Territorial Apprenticeship Directors. They just hosted their annual conference a couple months ago in Alabama. Thanks to Josh for hosting all of that. It was a great event, and we were able to have a discussion there about K-12 teacher apprenticeships. The other thing these three folks have in common, as you can see on this screen, is Florida, Wisconsin, and Alabama are all members of the National Registered Apprenticeship and Teaching Network. This is our state network that officially, as of this week, now has 30 members in it. So 60% of the country is a part of this network. We just added Arizona this week, so really excited about that. If you are a state that is not colored green on here and you are interested, whether you work for a state education agency or a state labor agency, there is a link to learn more about this network, as well as there'll be a link to potentially sign up or express interest to be in this network. We also happen to, not just for states, but we also have a similar network for school districts. And in case anybody has their afternoon wide open today, after this webinar in 30 minutes, we'll also be hosting a webinar focus on 3 school districts that are also members of this district network. As you can see in this network, we have districts as small as 1,500 students, and then literally the largest school district in the nation with New York City Public Schools. The point is, and you're going to learn today from Kathleen, David, and Josh, that registered apprenticeships in teaching can be done in any state, in any district, suburban, urban, and rural. It can be done regardless of size. This is all about removing financial barriers to ensure that more kids are getting the teachers they need and deserve by removing those financial barriers for aspiring educators. And finally, one other announcement that we came out this week with our good friends at Deans for Impact. We had a state network, we had a district network, and why not do one more? And that is a network for educator preparation providers, or in apprenticeship speak, related technical instruction or related instruction providers. So we're really excited to have launched this. I think we have over 30 ed prep providers from 17 different states. And so again, if you are an ed prep, a state or a district interested in learning more or potentially participating, and it's, please know it's probably within all of your budgets to participate, because all of these networks are absolutely free, no strings attached. And so with that, we're going to hear from Kathleen, David, and Josh, and we're going to open up this conversation with the first question, which is that each of you has a unique connection to K-12 education. Josh, you were an educator. Kathleen, your agency is the only one in the nation, to my understanding, where the state apprenticeship agency is literally inside of the state education agency at the Florida Department of Ed. And David, you come from a family of teachers and were an apprentice yourself. For each of you, and let's start with Kathleen here, what makes you excited about the potential for K-12 teacher registered apprenticeships?
Thank you so much, David. And we very much appreciate the opportunity to share our journey, which we really have just embarked on, I will say. Also, we want to thank you and your team at the National Center for the Leadership. You all have been so instrumental in helping to get us to this point. I've been working with our state apprenticeship agents here at the Florida Department of Education for a little over 10 years. And if you would have told me 5 years ago that the apprenticeship model would be used to train teachers, I would not have believed it. So for me, what really excites me is twofold. The first, as an apprenticeship advocate, is the fact that this time-honored, evidence-based model for preparing people for careers traditionally in construction and manufacturing, now healthcare, IT, is now being used throughout the United States to train our future teachers. And now the future is wide open, including principals and possibly other professions moving into education. And so that for me is the first thing that excites me. Personally in Florida, the opportunity for paraprofessionals who, but for their baccalaureate degree, which is required to teach in Florida, they've had a barrier, and many of these paraprofessionals have always wanted to be a teacher. And so for that reason, this is an opportunity for them now to afford them to have the opportunity to become a teacher of record, to live out their lifelong dream, and to have our district signaling to those parapros that they are committed to their success by investing in them, in supporting them as teacher apprentices, and making sure that they are classroom ready on day one once they're hired as the teacher of record. Those are the big things that really excite me.
And David, how about yourself? What gets you excited about the potential for K-12 registered apprenticeships for K-12 teachers? Sorry.
Well, for myself, I'm attuned and accustomed to the apprenticeship model because I came up through it. But one of the things I'm excited about is solving the hurdles of personnel for my wife. My wife is an elementary school principal. So when I tout and throw some of David's wild apprenticeship ideas, I always float them past my wife first. But that said, in talking with my wife and other educators about trying to solve the hurdles of the loss of teachers in their districts and in their classrooms, my wife has come to me multiple times about a teacher that she's lost and now has to fill a gap, or a student teacher that has left and gone to another school. I always float like, well, what if this was an apprenticeship model? What if this was the model that I went through, where I'm with you for a certain amount of time until I get certified, but I'm learning in your building for the duration of becoming licensed? And just absolutely loves the idea of that. So, now that I'm out of my plumbing apprenticeship and I'm in workforce building, the big thing is solving those workforce problems. And we understand, that teaching is a profession that has loads of workforce problems. So I'm excited about being a tool in the toolbox to help solve those workforce problems.
That's great. Thank you, David. And Josh, I'm sure you can relate to David's wife, elementary school principal, and based on your background, what gives you excitement and hope for the potential of teacher apprenticeships?
Yeah, thank you. Everybody in my family we're all teachers. My wife retired after 25 years of teaching high school English. And so I do the same thing, David. Every time I'm working on these things and I run it by her and she's like, no, that's a terrible idea. Do it this way. All right, got it. Subject matter expert. Yes, ma'am. I would just, without repeating everything that Kathleen and David have both said, I agree 100% with both of those comments about why we're excited about it. To me, one additional thing is, and David Donaldson, I heard you say this. This is something I've said for years. I heard you say it on a webinar not long ago. To me, like Kathleen was saying, you've got these parapros out there. You got these people. Some folks may disagree with this, but I believe you are either a teacher or you are not a teacher. And there are people who are teachers, but don't have a path to get the professional certifications to let them go be professional teachers. And, I can teach you how to teach, but I can't teach you to have the heart to be a good teacher. And so for me, I'm excited about creating a new vehicle for those folks in our state who have that heart, they have that drive, they have that commitment. They're the right people to do the job. There just been barriers in their way to keep them from getting the professional certification to do it. And to be clear, I'm also excited about this because we come up with a lot in Alabama. I'll own it. We come up with a lot of alternative pathways to be a teacher. And alternative almost universally means easier or less than or something. And the way that these programs are being developed, at least I know in the other two states that are here and in ours, this is not a path around or under any of the standards that it takes to become a teacher. This is a path to and through the certification requirements and holding and maintaining those standards. So I'm excited about, we won't solve the shortage of teachers in the state with this teacher apprenticeship program in the next few years. Not going to happen. But what I do believe is the first several batches of teachers that we turn out of these apprenticeship programs are likely to become some of the highest retained, best retention rates and highest quality teachers in the market. So that's our focus. Is we know we're not going to flood the market right out of the gate. We understand that, and that's not where we're setting our goal. We're setting our goal on eliminating that idea of the first year teacher. So there's not that lag time while you become a good teacher, and creating that path for people who can go out and be the best teachers in the state of Alabama quickly and for a long and prosperous career.
Woo. Josh, you are speaking my language. Literally today, I had a meeting with someone and it was about that use of the word, grow your own or registered apprenticeship. That's an alternative certification program, right? And I'm just like, no. Everywhere we have worked, and you're exactly right, in Florida, where we've had the honor of partnering with Kathleen, and in our conversations with David and with you, Josh, we are working with the educator preparation providers and the licensure policies that exist. Absolutely. It's meant to be the best of both worlds, getting that related instruction, getting that time in the college classroom, while also getting more time, to your point, Josh, under the mentor teacher, who is the teacher of record, to better prepare you to take over a classroom of your own. This will lead to longer retention. I couldn't agree more. And so, Josh, I'm going to stick with you on this one. Alabama has an incredible history with early childhood apprenticeships for teachers. I'm just kind of curious, based on Alabama's work in that space, what lessons have you taken from the early childhood registered apprenticeship movement that you are applying to your design of K-12 teacher apprenticeships?
Yeah, we have had some success in that, and we are still continuing to see growth in the early childhood apprenticeship model. Early childhood has its own separate challenge of wages being so desperately low in a lot of cases that it's hard to make that a family sustaining career. And so one of the things that we did there was we made sure, and I've got sitting here in the truck with me my actual subject matter expert on this topic, Meredith Smith, is my assistant director. So if you have questions about this, I'll send you her email. But one of the things we did there was make sure that we held that standard. We're training all the way through the bachelor's degree. Now, do you have to have a bachelor's degree in every early childhood education occupation? Not necessarily, but we want to train them all the way through. And we built in supports so that it's a tiered model of apprenticeship, so that we are getting those highest quality people, the highest level of training, so they have the maximum flexibility and the most to offer back to the systems they're working with. But as far as lessons learned, one thing we were learning, and we kind of know this going in, but a caution for everybody, these are rigorous programs. If you're going to be in class and working full time, the model has to be built in a way that works for working adults. But you also have to understand that this is not for everybody. People come in and say, oh, I've got this person that can't pass the praxis, or they've struggled in classes and whatever. Then don't sign them up for this apprenticeship program. Apprenticeship is at least bachelor's level work. I mean, this is rigorous stuff. So one lesson learned and that we're carrying forward is this is for our high flyers. The other is the funding model for education apprenticeships is just different than everything else. If I'm in machining or plumbing or whatever, or architecture or anything, and I'm selling things to the public and I'm generating revenue, then I can take that revenue and invest it pretty straightforward. I can decide I'm going to charge 10 cents more per widget, and I'm going to invest that in a training program to build new machinists or whatever I need. K-12 or early childhood, they don't have that option. They're not revenue generating entities in most cases. Some private early childhood are, but in most cases they're not, or if they are, they're operating on slim margins. So you've got to look for creative ways to, one, reduce the cost of the training program. And I know y'all have had a lot of success working with colleges and universities to discount that. We haven't had that much success with that, but we're figuring out other ways to offset those costs so that it's accessible for the employers as well as accessible for the participants. And then the third thing I would say that we're carrying forward, and this is true anytime our apprenticeship models are touching the traditional university post-secondary mindset, we have to work really hard with those EPPs, or we do this in nursing, we see it in early childhood, across the board, where we're engaging with universities or community colleges to get them to understand this is a mindset shift. An apprentice is an employee first. They're used to thinking of, I've got students that I'm sending out to try to get some work experience. That makes them better students. That's great. But that's the student that I'm getting a little bit of work experience for. And that student is under the guidance and the direction of the school that's training them. In an apprenticeship model, somebody is sending you their employee to provide professional development to. That's the way, and that's a hard shift for the schools, the universities, to kind of turn loose of that control a little bit. And sometimes it can be a difficult shift for employers, and especially in K-12, who are used to receiving an intern that shows up for a semester, and basically they're just, in the classroom with the teacher, and I don't really even have to think about the intern very much because the university's handling the intern. No. This is your employee. How good do you want them to be? So, those are some lessons we've learned from it. The mentors tend to be really invested in training their peer, their apprentice, when they understand that person's about to become my coworker. So they buy into it better, even than some of the senior leadership in the school and the university. But if we can get that mind shift done, then you get a different outcome.
Yep. First, I want to give a shout out to Meredith in your car, another member of the state network. She's a great one. Josh is exactly right. Second, I love your point about that mind shift, right? And we're seeing this more and more of an intentionality of the employer saying, wait a second, I can't rely on universities pumping out teachers like I used to 10 years ago. And that literally matches the statistics. Enrollment in ed preps nationally is down over the last 10 years. And so once you start being intentional, that's true talent development, which you all know from all the other industries you have worked in for years. But seeing that as a former principal, and David, I'm sure your wife would be able to say, I could name 5 people every time if I was ever asked who would make an excellent teacher if given a chance. And I had 2 parents in mind, 2 paraprofessionals, and a city or core member. Like I always knew those people. That goes back to Josh's point, had that heart for kids. And so speaking of having a heart for kids, David, one of the things that I want to give you kudos for is that recently I got to see you. We were both in Wisconsin together, but the reason I saw you is you were attending a WASPA conference. So that is the Wisconsin chapter of the American Association of School Personnel Administrators. Shout out to Kelly Coach Johnson, one of our advisory board members who leads the national group. But if you are a state or a district on this call today, invite your state apprenticeship agencies, invite your USDOL Office of Apprenticeship to come to these meetings. It was really impactful, I think, to see that. And so, David, you just attended, as I said. What did you hear from school districts in your state about their interest in this type of work, in registered apprenticeship and teaching work?
Thanks for that. And thank you, David, for attending. I think collaboratively, we made a lot of headway because The districts that were represented, firstly, they discussed the need, the adamant, the baseline need. Hey, we need help with personnel. Secondly, it was the conversation. We're hearing so much about this apprenticeship thing. What is it? Like, how can we do that in our districts? So that stated, I'm glad that I was able to attend because I was able to address those questions right away. That, hey, this is apprenticeship. We're gearing up to pull this off here in Wisconsin. You all should be part of this. If you're looking to pilot, we're building the pilot right now. You all should be part of this. But it was also a great discussion around what Josh alluded to, was that mind shift, because you're 100% right. There is the thought of the intern that comes in for a semester and then they're gone. But to explain to them, no, this is an individual that's with you between 2 and 4 years, and you're training them all the way through. This is your employee, and you're building your own workforce within your own school, and you get to own that training model. That's the way we do apprenticeship here in Wisconsin. So to explain that to them, to be able to own how they build up teachers and build up their workforce, it was an amazing conversation, and a lot of light bulbs were flickering on about twisting that mindset to more of developing our own workforce.
That's right. That's right. That proactive versus reactive. Totally. Kathleen, Florida first launched a registered apprenticeship pilot pathway focused on a master's degree process. Can you talk to me about Florida's approach to this initial pilot?
Yes. Well, David, at the top of the hour, you mentioned the 2-year anniversary of the recognition of teaching the profession as an apprenticeable occupation. And shortly thereafter, in the States, we started to see the media avalanche that came down. And we, of course, naturally, and I'm sure my colleagues experienced the same thing, received calls from members at the Capitol just across the street from me about, when are we going to do this? Or policy groups or advocacy groups were starting to really inquire about what this was going to look like, and was Florida going to adopt this? And so it came down to really 2 things for us. One, it was all about timing. And also we had to, I think, adopt the notion of don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. And so we started to think about, what do we have the statutory authority for right now that we could use to try and create some kind of pilot? At this time, when we were thinking about the post-baccalaureate pathway, we did not have statutory authority to even consider a pre-baccalaureate pathway. That came later down the road. And so we think the post-bac model really maybe helped pave the way for the legislation that passed in Florida this past spring. And then we also had some coronavirus federal dollars at our disposal. And our governor's office had really asked us to think differently about how we were going to use those funds. So we thought this is a great time. We have an infrastructure in Florida to help individuals who already have a bachelor's degree that want to enter the teaching ranks. Let's use what we call Educator Preparation Institutes, EPIs. Let's use that model. Let's find a partner. And we found the University of Florida. And so with them and their participating school districts, who we call the Coalition of the Willing, UF really championed the notion of using this model. But we had to learn a lot from one another. I did not know the world of EPP, and they did not know the world of apprenticeship. And so to this day, we continue to work together to make sure that we're understanding one another's language and that we're conversing in it. And so we use those dollars to fund and seed our first apprenticeship program in Florida, which is sponsored by the University of Florida. They're operational. It's a small program. They have 3 participating employers. The teacher apprentices are paraprofessionals in those 3 school districts. These are individuals who already have a bachelor's degree. And then University of Florida is providing the related instruction in the form of the coursework that's necessary to prepare them to be a teacher of record. They will also, incidentally, graduate with a master's degree. I also want to go back a few years in terms of Florida apprenticeship history. It's fairly recently that our statutes changed, allowing us to use the apprenticeship model to prepare for careers that customarily required a degree. And so teaching and other professions that do require a degree, had it not been for that legislation about 5 years ago, it really positioned us well to really start to think about more college-connected apprenticeship programs and taking a page out of the success of construction. And so I'll stop there and we can talk more about it in a little bit.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And shout out to our good friend Tina Smith Bonahue at University of Florida, who, if I'm not mistaken, Kathleen, after creating the master's degree pathway, they've literally created a new role at the University of Florida for her, a director of apprenticeships, a teacher apprenticeship role, which is really cool to see. And we really enjoyed working with her, and of course you, Kathleen. Josh, Kathleen mentioned something about some phone calls or emails, or maybe a pigeon flying down with a memo from Capitol Hill. Can you tell me about your experience when it comes to that, and specifically Alabama's governor's executive order when it came to the K-12 teacher apprenticeship?
Yes. Yeah, our governor doesn't do pigeons. She does, tapes it around a rock and chucks it. Yeah. So no, Governor Ivey has really, led the way in a lot of areas nationally in workforce development issues by using her convening authority. That's something, as I talk to some of my peers in other states, I always tell them, like, they ask, what's the secret? How did this work out? Governor Ivey will use her convening authority and say, you, and you, everybody related to this, get in a room and sort this out for the people of our state. That's what I want done. So, I appreciate that from her, very clear leadership and clear guidance about what she wants to see, the outcomes. And if you go and, if you want to read the executive order, you can, but it basically says, go get this done. And also it provides us a point of common reference so that my office and the State Department of Education, we can work together and understand, here's the vision. And so she doesn't say, here's how to get it done. In the executive order, it's not prescriptive, which, sometimes can happen. You get, like Kathleen said, you get a legislator who's really motivated and active on this particular topic, whatever it is. And sometimes you get handed the playbook. So I appreciate the way Governor Ivey handled this and many other issues related similar to this. There's the mountain. Go take it, plant the flag on top of that hill. You figure out how to get it done, to get there. So, those of you who are in states who are still trying to figure this out, or if you haven't had success in that, if you can, call on, there's nobody in your state better to wield that convening authority. And we always jokingly say, she'll lock us in the basement of the building, tell us don't come out till it's sorted. She hasn't yet locked us in the basement. But that's kind of the mindset is, the governor said, get this done, go get it done. And that gives everybody the necessary fuel, I think, to understand that this is a priority of our state, and not doing it is not an option. And Kathleen, I love don't let the perfect become the enemy of the good. We'll do that in education in a second. I was they. We will do that in a second. We'll put a program on hold because, we're not quite sure about, and education has this unique thing where it operates at a glacial pace anyway, because you really only get one time per academic year to take a shot at it, right? If you're going to institute changes, that's got to be put into the course catalog or the course descriptions or whatever in February to go into effect next August. You can't wait around and say, we're going to do it in the summer before school starts. So anyway, long answer to a simple question, but the executive order really did provide us with the clarity that we needed. And it's just another example of Governor Ivey's leadership on pointing us in a direction and telling us to go get the task done.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's amazing how many folks underestimate the power even of the bully pulpit. It's amazing how that can be leveraged to your point, Josh, making very clear what one's priorities are in this work. I'd also just say to your point about as given the compliment to Kathleen on what she shared, that's one of the benefits too of having a state network where now states can say, hey, how have you attempted this? Because folks don't need to do this work from scratch. That's the key. Before this webinar started, folks, we were kind of talking about how you can learn just as much from a state that's doing this well, or a state that, you know, might not be your cup of tea. And that could apply to a boss you've worked for, that could apply to a lot of different things in life. But one of the things that now having 30 states in the network, the National Registered Apprenticeship and Teaching Network, it's a chance to see, hey, how are you approaching this? And connecting folks. Thanks to Alabama, I think I just connected you all to folks in Colorado this week. So it's just great to folks be able to listen and learn from one another. Speaking of learning from one another, in Wisconsin, David, you have an incredible youth apprenticeship program, one of the biggest in the nation, if not the biggest, and please share about that. But also, how do you think long-term you can see youth apprenticeship leverage for building that talent pipeline for teacher registered apprenticeships?
Thank you, David. You're right. We do have a very, very boisterous youth apprenticeship system with over 8,300 youth apprentices in the 22-23 school year. And we most recently opened up our early childhood educator youth apprenticeship for young people to start to take the pathway toward an education occupation while they're still in high school. That said, we see that as a very succinct pipeline for a young person to go through that ECE youth apprenticeship during their junior and senior year and go right into a teacher apprenticeship. And schools, now that they see that we've opened up that pathway, they are thinking the same way of how can we keep the young people that are interested in becoming an educator on our grounds and take them through the pathway, because the young people nowadays are leaning into more contextual learning, more learning on the job, which is the apprenticeship model. And for that ability for them to have that ability to stay within their district, schools can recruit from their own via youth apprenticeship, and for us to have a streamlined model to pathway them into a teacher apprenticeship, I can only see great outcomes. And I look forward to utilizing the ECE youth apprenticeship to break another record and hopefully go over 10,000 youth apprentices in Wisconsin with that added pathway.
I love it. We're going to have to, as Kathleen shared, it's the 2-year anniversary of the occupation of a teacher being approved. We should do an anniversary of this webinar a year from today, next National Apprenticeship Week, and we'll check in on everyone's progress and numbers, and that'd be great to see. Kathleen, you alluded to this, and I was setting you up earlier for the master's degree pathway. Well, you got a master's degree pathway, and you build off of that. And now Florida has a bachelor's degree registered apprenticeship pathway rolling out, funded by your governor and state legislature. Can you share about the benefits of now having both a bachelor's and a post-bac pathway for your registered apprenticeship and teaching program?
Yes, and we are developing that pre-baccalaureate pathway real time. In fact, my colleague who is sponsoring the statewide program, she just called me while I was on this webinar. So that's how real time it is. But it's just about the reach and the continuing of the kinds of candidates that we can attract. So our paraprofessionals who, again, for lack of that baccalaureate, the ability to go back, maybe it's a financial burden to go back, family reasons, it's just not realistic to be able to get a bachelor's degree, to career changers who are perhaps coming out of industry and already have a bachelor's degree, but no traditional training that you would get in a traditional EPP. So it's really a full continuum, a full spectrum of the kinds of candidates, I think, that we can attract, and also for those that really desire a very structured experience and a paid experience. And that's what the registered apprenticeship model does. And so I think that's one of the leading benefits now for having both pathways.
Yeah, yeah, it's that yes and approach, right? Like the folks that have bachelor's degrees, it's likely those you'd be able to get some career changers into the profession, but unfortunately, 80% of folks that we believe that 80% of the potential teacher pipeline are folks who don't yet have the bachelor's. And those are
Right.
the folks, the paraprofessionals, it could be bus drivers, cafeteria workers. It's literally people like my mom, who was my school cafeteria worker, who, to Josh, your earlier talk about having that heart for kids. My mom was a Sunday school and vacation Bible school teacher for over 2 decades. She had a heart for kids, but did not have the bachelor's degree path, did not have a bachelor's degree, didn't have any college. And so Kathleen, kudos to Florida for having that yes and approach. Speaking of kudos, want to give a shout out to somebody who submitted a question that literally like read my mind, because it's the actually next plan question anyway. So shout out to Hannah from LPI, Learning Policy Institute, which they do incredible work, research work, folks. Big fans of them. So for this question will be for each of you, and it is: can you each share about how you are approaching this work with your respective state education agency? We're actually going to start with Kathleen, though, because she's literally a part of a state education agency, and then we'll go from there. So Kathleen?
Well, sure. We are unique, and it has been a fairly seamless process, I must say, because we're under the same governing board. We're co-located in the same building. I'm on floor 7, they're on floor 1, but we didn't know one another. And as I mentioned earlier, we didn't speak the same language. So before we got to this point, we've spent months together understanding the world of EPP and the world of apprenticeship. But from that point forward, it's been very, very collaborative. They sponsored a statewide program, and they had to promulgate State Board of Education rules. And we were in the room with them helping to write the rule. They wanted to make sure that everything followed what we call the quality components of the registered apprenticeship model. Likewise, when we receive $5 million, this is kind of startup dollars that are being sent to our EPPs to help school districts scale these programs. Those dollars are flowing through our division, so we're responsible for them. But in developing the grant program, we worked every day, every hour with our colleagues who are sponsoring the program to make sure we designed the program, the grant program, reviewed the applications together, selected the awardees, and we hope that we'll be able to award those in the coming weeks. Now we're partnering on a state symposium together for the end of January. So it's very lockstep, and we have really clear communication and a great relationship with that team. And more than anything, we want this to succeed. We are very invested in this, as we are in all apprenticeship, because this is so unprecedented. We are there to support our team who's sponsoring our state program.
Great, great. And Kathleen, just to confirm one thing with you, with this bachelor's degree pathway, can you please reiterate who the sponsor is for this program?
Yes, so it was determined even before the legislation passed that the State Department of Education would be the sponsor, and our school districts would be the participating employers.
Great. Thank you for that. David, we'll go to you next, and then Josh.
Yeah, so unfortunately, our DWD, where my office is under, the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development, and our Wisconsin Department of Instruction, we're in separate houses. So that said, it takes a large collaborative effort to kind of bring us together. And I want to give a shout out to the National Center for Grow Your Own and David Donaldson, as you were in the room for one of those conversations. But the conversation is around, as Kathleen alluded to, speaking the same language, because I speak workforce language, they speak academics language, but then also devising a plan that which we can merge the two to address the concern, starting off on a page of a shared outcome. We both want to assess the teaching industry and the districts that are under their purview, but we want to implore a lot of the workforce ideas via the apprenticeship model to help try to cure some of those ills. So that said, we're collaborating in the build. We'll have dual. Our model will have districts that are the sponsor, but our Department of Instruction has fervently said they want to be the sponsor. But of course, as a workforce development entity, we have to reach across both iterations. So we'll have both. But I think that it will be a promising model to have DPI as a sponsor, but not the employer of record, because then they will also have a lot of hands-on, and it actually will force us to have to work collaboratively in order for the apprenticeship model to work in its most effective form. And that's what we really want. We want this to be a long-term based model that will train up new teachers for years to come. That said, a lot of the funding, as Kathleen, you alluded to, is flowing through the apprenticeship office, and we're prepared as we roll out to provide those cushions for those pilot districts to receive some funding to support the apprenticeship model.
Thanks, David. Appreciate that. Josh, over to you and your relationship with the state education agency.
Yeah, so we are. It's interesting. We've seen all three models here. So Kathleen, state agency, going to be the sponsor. David's going to have both. We're going to have our EPPs are going to be the sponsors. We started on the plan of having agency as a sponsor. Then just as we developed it for a variety of reasons, we wound up with EPPs being sponsors. But our State Department of Education is doing something for us that we think is a very critical component. And we actually learned this from our development of our nursing program. We see the job of teacher apprentice as a unique occupation. So I'll often say, you don't learn how to be a nurse while working as a CNA. Even if you're going to nursing school, it's not the same job. You don't learn how to be a brain surgeon by working as a nurse, right? So what we have done in the nursing example, we work with our state nursing board to create a nurse apprentice license, which very clearly delineates this as a different occupation with its own scope of practice and its own responsibilities and all of that. We carried that to our State Department of Education, and they are doing that same thing for us. Our State Department of Education, of course, is the licensing body. They're creating for us a teacher apprentice license or certificate. I forget which one they're calling it, but a teacher apprentice permit of some type that has its own set of responsibilities, its own scope of practice, if you will. That's critical to us because that helps when we work in that mindset shift that we were talking about. That helps the school systems to think of this person in a different job. One of our, concerns and things that we keep reiterating to these employers, don't think you can put this person into this teacher apprenticeship job and expect them to keep doing their old one. If they were a parapro, they're not a parapro anymore. You got to backfill that. So now let's do something like what David's talking about. Hey, maybe we need a youth program so that they come out of high school with most of the coursework necessary to be a parapro. So they're already on this path, whatever that looks like. But I'd say that's our State Department of Education's biggest contribution is being willing, and State Superintendent Eric Mackey really was the one that just said, yes, we will make that happen. And everybody who's ever dealt with, teacher licensure, that's a complex world to navigate. It gives me a headache thinking about it, but they have to operate within so many different sets of parameters. There's so many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. There's the accrediting body for the university, and then there's the State Board of Education, and et cetera, et cetera. And then the only other thing I would say too is, we started with 14 potential sponsors. If we have 14 approved EPPs in the state. And by the time we went through and started really working on, we and the State Department of Education both committed right up front. We're not dropping requirements from what it takes to become a teacher, but you got to build a path that works for working adults, or you haven't done anything different. That's what we're doing here, is making something that works for working adults. And I think collectively, we all kind of came to a realization, a little bit of an aha moment. Maybe one of the reasons we have such a shortage of teachers, we went from 14 who said, yeah, we'd be interested in talking about it, down to only 4 EPPs in the state who really had a flexible enough program that it could work for working adults. And that's caused some reflection and some introspection at those other colleges and universities, where I think they're going to be going back to the drawing board a little bit, saying, hey, you know, maybe we've got to be more flexible. And so our State Department of Ed has been critical, because they're the ones who approve, the State Board of Education approves those EPPs. They've played a key role in that discussion too. So I think we will see a growth in capacity to grow teachers as a result of the hard look that we had to take to develop this program. At least that's my hope, and I think that'll happen.
Well, Josh, I just want to echo something you said. As the former chief of human capital for the Tennessee Department of Ed, who oversaw all educator licensure, it is complicated. So much so that I couldn't even agree with myself to make changes. So that's why we kept it out of licensure. And that goes back to that earlier conversation about how this was not an alternative program. We wanted to keep it out because licensure is a mess. I'll give a little sneak preview. Come December 6th, and we'll send this out to everyone on this webinar. We'll be hosting another webinar that features a brand new partnership. Josh, exactly what you're talking about innovating within educator licensure. We're going to be partnering with Columbia Law School, the Center for Public Research and Leadership, on that, and feature one of your friends there, folks, Todd Birch, who is the president of the National Association of State and Territorial Apprenticeship Directors, as well as Chief Talent Officer Shwana Tucker. So because you're exactly right, there's a lot of places where we got to address licensure to be able to have more accessible, not lowering the bar, thank you for saying that, Josh, but more accessible pathways into the profession that will make grow your own and registered apprenticeship programs more easy to take advantage of. Because some of these rules were written for a different time and age. And if any man or woman created a policy, any man or woman today can change that policy. And we should be using that power, whether it's the bully pulpit or whether it's executive orders or policy, to make changes so more folks can have that opportunity to become a teacher. With the next question I have for you all is that when I'm just kind of curious, from being a state apprenticeship agency, and Josh, you kind of hit on this a little bit, and so maybe I'll come back around to you last on this one. When a district or an ed prep provider comes to you, what advice do you offer them? What actions do you take if they're like, hey, I think I want to do this? How do you respond to that? Let's start with Kathleen first on this one.
Well, this might sound very simplistic, but we want an interested school district or their EPP to have a really solid command of the apprenticeship model. And so we talk about what the quality components of registered apprenticeship is. And it really is it's interesting to see the reactions because they're not accustomed to this. And so we explain the concept that the majority of learning is going on the job. And the faculty, essentially, instead of a faculty member in a university classroom, you're being taught under the tutelage of a veteran teacher mentor. And that it's the related instruction that is really supplemental in nature. And so we give them a little time to think through all of those things and all of the commitments that they would need to make, because essentially they're investing in their talent pipeline for the future. And the other thing is, it's okay to not be ready. You may need a little bit more time to think through, to plan accordingly. And so there's no need really to rush into this. The other thing that someone mentioned, I think it was Josh, in terms of the EPP component does need a change in mindset. And so we've looked to some of our state exemplars out there, and there are many of them that are part of the network, David, that you flashed earlier on the screen, who are taking a more experiential approach to giving teacher apprentices credit towards the award of a baccalaureate degree based on what they're learning on the job. And so, for example, if it's classroom management, instead of sitting through a course in classroom management, they're learning the principles and the foundation of that real time on the job. And so it can't be the same model that we've had in the past where we have teacher apprentices in the day going through and taking 3-4 classes at night. That's not going to work. And so they have to really think differently. And it is complex because these providers have their own program accrediting standards, institutional accrediting standards. But these are the kinds of things that other states and other EPPs are doing, and it can be done here. So we start with the foundation, we start with the basics. We have so many people inquiring that we're starting to talk about working with our partners to establish like office hours and information session where we can provide real-time information to those that are interested.
Great. David, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. That process is reaching out to us. We work alongside our Department of Instruction. In Wisconsin, we're the ones that kind of convey the meetings of the minds with the employers, with the certifying agencies, bring that all together to agree upon an apprenticeship process. So definitely reach out to us. We'll set up individual meetings. Again, we're still at building our pilot, so there's room if districts want to come on board. But we kind of convey that meeting as the workforce leaders in building those apprenticeships, and also, as Kathleen alluded to, kind of getting everyone on the same page with regard to language, speaking the same language, and also the ideas of what this individual will be doing in your respective school district or your respective individual school. So that said, definitely reaching out to the Bureau of Apprenticeship Standards and starting that process.
Great. And Josh?
Yeah, I would just say, like if an employer comes to us, it's different. Just like Kathleen said, if an employer comes and they say, "Oh, I want to do this. I want to do this. I heard about it on the news and I saw that all these other states are doing it." Great. Do you actually know what you're saying you want to do? So let's just pause for a moment, make sure that you understand what you're asking to get involved in, because as we always say, an apprentice is an employee first, and this is an employer investment in their people. You are investing in your people. Are you prepared to do that? When you say grow your own, there's a danger in they don't understand what that means. But even if you just think about the most basic version of growing anything, I can't just shove the seed in the ground, walk away, and expect them to come back and have a bountiful harvest. That's not how growing your own anything works. So for the employers, we want to make sure that they know what they're asking to be involved in. For the ed prep providers or sponsors, and this is true across the board, no matter where this industry or something else, we'll have organizations that get excited. They want to be a sponsor of an apprenticeship. Same thing. Do you know what it is that you're asking to do? Do you know what you're asking to be involved in? But then in this particular case, we've kind of already touched on this. Well, plain out, ask them, well, are all of your classes offered from 9 to 2, Monday through Thursday? Then you aren't prepared to jump into this. So you're going to have to go back to the drawing board a little bit first. And to Kathleen's point, we've got some, and the ones that are participating now, they're hungry. I'm not throwing rocks at any organization, but I'll just say we have found that the smaller schools that are they're hungry. If you're a big enough school, you've just got the idea that people are going to sign up and enroll here no matter what. But the smaller schools will jump on what does it take for us to be adaptable. And one of the things that we've found we really like is this competency-based assessment idea like Kathleen's talking about. And it's within their purview already. They don't have to go get new accreditation or whatever. Everybody has to wind up with such and such a class on their transcript. But how the university evaluates whether you mastered that content or not is not prescribed. So we have several examples, and we did this in early childhood as well, where the apprentice is going to be documenting on the job training, mastering the competencies. They keep a little portfolio, and that's what they submit and get a grade for on their transcript. It's not pass, fail. It's a graded activity, but the evaluation of how you learned it doesn't come from a paper and pencil test in the, in the academic setting. It comes from real world. Can you do that thing? Is the apprentice able to do that thing? And if they can be judged to be able to do that thing, then you got it. Competency-based assessment, move on. So, it's different whether it's an employer or a sponsor potential. Everybody, basically, it boils down to the same thing. I want you to know what you're asking to get into before you dive off into it. And if that means you got to hold up for a year, cool, hold up for a year. Let's make sure we get it right rather than get it fast.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, yeah, I mean, there's so much great wisdom by the three of you all in your responses. Thank you. I think one thing in particular, just want to highlight, and this was said earlier, I think it was by you, Josh, like, if this is done well, it is eliminating the concept of a first-year teacher by measuring those competent. We're not throwing people, like, this is going to lead to longer retention because folks are adequately prepared. They're not somebody like me who truly did do an alternative certification program and just dove right in and, ooh, I was not ready for that. And so this is about preparing people better, setting them up, because that's the right thing to do for kids as well. Kids deserve high quality, day one ready teachers, period, regardless of your zip code. Want to recognize that there's quite a few questions in the chat. There's quite a few specifically all around funding. Ben or Miles from my team, I'm going to ask that you put the webinar link, because we cover funding a lot in our registered apprenticeship and teaching 101 webinar. So would encourage folks to watch that, or we're actually doing one next week with NASDAQ, who for those who please sign up for the national convening of which we're having in January in San Antonio. Excited for that conference. And in closing, Miles, if you could share the screen again right quick, starting with that state network slide. Again, I want to thank Kathleen, David, and Josh, all members of this state network. Again, we're at 60% of the country now. If you are a state that is not in this network, please feel free to reach out. Or if you are a school district, or as well as an ed prep provider, there is a network for you. All three of these are completely free. And then we also have our contact information, I believe, available to be shown. Again, Kathleen, David, and Josh, state apprenticeship agencies are gonna be the ones that show what is possible and will continue to inspire the rest of the country. I also think your leadership is going to also help get more and more sustainable funding, which will lead to expansion of this work. Thank you to each of you. Thank you to your governors and your state legislators as well, and your state education agencies, and for your leadership to bridge, well, Kathleen going up the elevator to a different floor, David walking across the street, and as Josh shared in his example, and specifically of outreach to the ed prep providers as well, and working with his state on the licensure element. So folks, for all who attended, you heard 3 different leadership styles, or 3 different state perspectives, which did include different leadership styles. And the more and more you all hear, the more and more you can take back to your respective state to see what is the best approach for you all, as we all have that shared mission of ensuring that every child has not only the teacher they need, but deserve. On behalf of the National Center for Grow Your Own, thank you so much. Kathleen, David, and Josh, one more time, kudos to you all, and thank you for participating in today's webinar.